What's up, ZBrushers? Welcome to ZFever. My name is Ricky, and today we're going to be talking about how to use ZBrush to create illustrations. So, basically, we're going to be taking 3D objects and busting them down into a 2D format. Okay, this is a useful thing that you can use. Um, Useful thing that you can use. This is something that you can use to, if you're working in graphic design, or maybe you have a client that wants to, who maybe likes an idea that you have, but they don't really have much use for a 3D model. There are tons of things that you can do with this, and I'm always looking for ways to use things in a bit of a not so traditional fashion, so to speak. ZBrush is, over the years, it's become like this mainstay for 3D, which obviously that's why it's around. But it still has uses in other formats, right? And there are lots of people who are actually using this for illustration. So we're going to talk about how to get renders out of here. We're not going to really be doing much sculpture here today. But if you've gone through and you created a character and you just want to make it look different, you want to display it in a little bit of a different light, then this might be interesting for you. Okay, so what we're going to be using today is we're going to be using ZBrush. And then we're also going to be using Photoshop. If you prefer some other program like GIMP or Corel Draw or even Sketchbook, you can definitely use those. So we're going to be grabbing renders out of ZBrush and then turning those into a composite. So let's get going. So if you got a model that you've been working on and you want to just do some renders, you don't necessarily have to have something that's broken down for practical 3D purposes, right? So this is like a quick sketch that I did. Probably took about 45 minutes, and it's something that I just did for fun, for practice, right? But I don't necessarily have to leave it just as this. If I want to display it in a different light, then I can, right? I don't have to go through and completely retopologize this thing to make it look interesting or appealing and all that stuff. So um, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to dock this lighting palette over, because we're going to want to use that. We're also going to want to use our render palette to change some settings, and then we'll also want to grab our material palette and throw it over there too. So that will be, it's easier to do that than to sit here and have to go through every single one of these menus. Okay, the other thing that we want to consider is how are we rendering this out? So whatever your system is, you're going to have a default size of the canvas, right? And you want to make the best use of this possible. And you're going to need to consider, what is the resolution that I want to have at the end. So if you have a low, say you're working on a laptop or something like that, say for instance, whenever I first started using ZBrush, I was using pretty much just a, a MacBook Pro that was a 13-inch monitor, and the default size of the canvas would always be pretty small. So if you want more real estate, so to speak, then you may want to go through and adjust your document settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this proportional constraint off, and I'm just going to make this 2048 square. So just 2048 by 2048, and then I'm going to go resize. Okay, ZBrush is going to bark at you and say, do you really want to do this? And I'm going to say, yep. And you're going to see things stretch out a bit. I'm just going to hit Control N on the keyboard, and it'll get rid of that. I'm going to drop this model back into place, and turn edit on. Now you want to, this won't be the end of it all, so you need to actually use this zoom slider to bring things out, because if I were just rendering this out right now, if I go to pull one of these renders, it'll be a 2048 by 2048, but my model is actually going to look like this in the final render. So you want to make sure that you're aware of this whenever you're going through and not wasting render space, okay? Now, keep in mind with a larger render space, right? Depending on your system, it could take a little longer for things to render out. So we're gonna pick an angle here. I don't know, say something like that, and you could play around with the perspective. You know, maybe you want perspective on, maybe you don't. You can play around with the camera settings. So let's see. Right now it's got a view of 50. Let's bring that down to 30 or 70. Let's see. It just depends on the kind of look you're going for. Like if I really wanted to bring it up there, you know, it's a really wide angle. Looks weird. So you know, it really just depends on what's appealing to you. So let's bring this down to, I think 70 is good. Okay, so I think this is pretty much the angle that I'm going to go with. And then the next thing I want to start messing around with is the lighting setup. Okay, so I'm just gonna play around with this a bit, just trying to come up with something that's interesting to me. Now, what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna switch over to another material temporarily. Now, if you're using something that's pre-painted, then this might not be feasible for you. But I like to throw down just a basic material so that I can get my lighting situated. So I'm just gonna fill this with that color, and this is gonna help me to be able to see what is happening with the lighting. So there are a couple of things that you can play with here. You can turn up the ambient, and that's going to make it really blown out, or you can just shut it down altogether. You can control the intensity of the light, and these are just standard lights. You can actually go through and use light caps, but we're not going to mess with that today. So I'm just going to find something. It's kind of a just a key light. I don't want it to be too terribly blown out. I think that's good. And we can also, if we want to, we can throw in a rim light. And what we'll do is we'll turn on this light, and then we'll just click on this sphere right here. And what you'll see is that as I bring it over to the side, it'll bring up a rim. And if I increase the intensity, you'll see how it operates, right? So this basically takes the light from the front of the model to the back of the model. May or may not use this. So I'm just going to do a really quick BPR just to see how things are playing. It's not bad, but we can improve this. Sometimes this takes me forever just because I'm so picky whenever it comes to things. So let's see, we're gonna go with that, and let's play around with our shadow settings. So you can affect your shadows. This is under the render palette. Okay. First of all, you want to make sure that they're turned on. By default, they should be, right? But if you don't know, you can just come up to render properties, and this will show you everything that's activated currently, right? So for our purposes, we're pretty much only going to be using shadows. Um, if I were to turn this off, you'll see that it changes in the document, and whenever you go to render, shadows shouldn't show up at all. Um, so once you've confirmed that those are on, you can just close that out, and then we can start playing with the shadow properties. So some of the things you want to pay attention to are the global strength, um, number of rays that you're going to be using. So this is going to control the quality of the shadows, right? So if you want higher quality shadows, you're going to want to bump this up. So I'm going to bump it up to say 50. Now the higher that you go, the more rays it's going to be casting, which means more stuff to calculate whenever you go to render. So don't be surprised if your renders start to take a little bit longer, right? So render size, render quality, and all that other stuff definitely comes into play whenever you're messing around in here. Okay, so something else that you can control is the angle, and this pulls from the light angle, right? And so more of an angle is going to cause it to give a softer shadow. So I'm going to for this, I'm gonna stick with say something. I might not even use it, but I'm gonna set an angle of 7, and we'll leave the blur at 2 and just see how this plays. So I'm gonna take a quick render and see things are pretty soft, and that's nice. All right. Something else we can play with is the render properties. So let's see. If you want to increase the quality of your render, you can bump this up a bit. Looks like the max that it goes is 4. And if you're doing high detail work, you're probably gonna want to use that. Okay, so we got that going. And I wanna mess with that rim light just a little bit more. It's a little bit blown out now. And really, all this comes down to is just playing around with the settings and trying to find out what works. And if you find a setting that you like and you want to make it consistent, note that stuff down. Make sure that you write these things down, plug it in somewhere, and that way you have consistency across the board for all the things that you're doing. Something else that might want to consider is I've got these eyes are supposed to be pretty reflective, so I'm gonna turn on another light. Okay, and I want to adjust this around, see if I can capture at least a little bit of a highlight. Worst case scenario, we can go through and just plug a highlight in Photoshop. It doesn't seem to be picking up. Let me make sure I've got my material right on this. So I'm just going to throw a toy plastic. Drop the distance down. There we go. As always, you want to do another render just to make sure that it hasn't screwed up everything else that you've been working on. Okay, so this is fine. So we're going to use this. Drop that down just slightly. Okay, we're going to use these settings, and we're going to start plugging in different materials for our render. So I've set this as my angle. Now you want to make sure that you're not going through and changing this up, because if you move this model around, it's going to screw up this entire process, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to be taking a series of renders from this specific model, right? And we're going to take those over into Photoshop, and then we're going to composite them. All right, so I'm just going to select a series of different materials. So I'm going to start with, I like to start with a framer or something that's kind of grayscale. And so I'm just going to go through and I'm going to make sure that material is the only thing that's on. You don't necessarily need to mess with a Z add or anything like that because we're not sculpting. But I'm just going to fill the object, and you're going to see that it changes. And so we're going to take a render of this, and we're going to go up to, I'm going to shut down this light palette, don't need it, and shut that down, and we'll go ahead and leave that open for now. So the things we're going to be messing with are the BPR render pass, right? Something else that we can control, we can control the anti-aliasing, so we might want to bring this up. Now it will affect render time. So let's go through and do another render. Now you're not going to really see much of a difference here in the document just because we've zoomed out of the document considerably, right? But once we get over into Photoshop, it'll change. So we're going to start pulling these renders. So I'm going to grab this. This is just the standard shaded render. I'm going to grab this, and let's create a folder. I'm going to put it in digital drawings. I'm going to make a new folder. So you can use whatever naming convention you want. And I'm just saving all these out as PSDs. And I want to grab that. I want to grab this mask. This is gonna be useful. And you can grab the shadows if you want to. Let's go ahead and grab them just for the hell of it. Now this is the only time that I'm going to go through and grab all of these. The rest of them I'm just going to be grabbing the shaded. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to grab a series of these. Sometimes I like to grab different shaded versions of the framer. And some of these we may use, some of these we may not. So I'm going to fill that. Take a render. I usually like to do at least one that's got kind of a shiny surface because you can get some interesting results whenever you go to composite. It's not the most shiny thing in the world. And sometimes you may just want to go through and turn off shadows. What I'm going to do now, it'll actually save on render time, and since I already have the shadow pass, then I can just use that to lay over everything else. I always like to grab just some random materials. I don't necessarily plan to use them, but it's always good to have. Pamela, I'll get to your question here in a few. I'm not sure that there's a way to modify the mat cap because that's a material that was created. I know that you can adjust the lights whenever you're going to bake them. I'll have to do a little digging to determine whether or not that's a full-blown possibility. I know you can copy them, and I know that you can use them to mix together new materials. I mean, you can change colors and things like that to a degree. Yeah, looks like you can. So you can adjust the colors on here. You can change the orientation of that just by playing around with this stuff. But it's based on these channels, so I don't feel bad. There's a lot of information. Even even in my certification classes, there's so much stuff that gets added in here, and then sometimes things get taken out. I mean, because this is 4R7, so pretty much everything that has been in ZBrush version 4 up till 7, there have been modifications. Some things have changed, but a lot of stuff is just continue to be added to it, and so things just kind of get buried in there from time to time. And so there are tools in here that people don't really even use anymore, but they're still available. Um, I mean, there's a full blown drawing side of ZBrush that a lot of people don't even know about. Um, and I'm not talking about 2.5D. It's actual drawing part of the program. Um, So I mean, there's tons and tons of stuff in here that's, you know, you're not going to find all the information on YouTube. You've really got to dig in here. Okay, so we're going to hop over to Photoshop and start compositing these things real quick. Okay, so the idea that I want to do is I want to take this, I want to take all of this, and I want to composite it in such a way that it looks maybe like something that I drew on a piece of paper, right? So I'm going to take this, and we're going to be grabbing all of our information. We're going to be throwing it on here, or let's see, yeah. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to adjust this. I'm going to desaturate it, lighten it up a little bit. Adjust the contrast. Just want it to look kind of gritty, not too terribly gritty, otherwise it's going to look blown out. That's fine. So the way I like to go about this is I like to choose one of these as my base from which to pull everything else onto. So I want to try to stick with something that's kind of a grayscale. So this will be my base, right? Something that's relatively flat, um, that I can bump the contrast up if I need to. So I'm going to turn this into a layer just by double clicking on background. So I'm just going to create a layer, and the first thing I want to do is I'm going to come up to my select menu, and I'm going to go down to load selection, and from here I'm going to pull from that mask that we collected. So I'm just going to go OK. Now if you're using an older version of Photoshop, you might want to invert this. Photoshop is kind of picked up on my habits, I suppose, or it's actually behaving the way that I want it to natively. But all you're going to do is hit Control X. So it's basically pulled from that alpha and made a selection out of it. And so now I can get rid of everything on the background. Now, because I don't want to have this blown out white, right? I'm going to I'm just going to go ahead and take that paper. I'm going to copy it over to this one. I'm just going to paste it and use that as my background. And something that I noticed right away is you see how things are kind of, you can see how this is a tiled texture. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to duplicate this. Yep. And this one I'm going to make a multiply. But what I want to do with this is I'm actually going to rotate it slightly. Rotate it, and then I'll bring it up in size. And I'm just trying to break up that pattern, right? And I'm just going to duplicate this again, and I'm going to do the same thing going in the other direction. Okay, so we have our base. And so what I'm going to do is, now that I have this, I'm just going to grab all these, hit Control E, and merge them down into one layer. I'm done with that. I can affect this a bit. Go into adjustments and control my brightness. Always like to use legacy. There's no real particular reason other than that's just what I do. So I'm gonna start grabbing these and getting them over into the other file. So I'm gonna go through. Technical difficulties. We'll be right back. Yeah, I had to go through and modify some things. So um, Photoshop operates off of a scratch disk, and depending on what your settings are, if you go over to Edit and go down to Preferences, if you're wondering where your scratch disk is, you can just click on scratch disk and it'll tell you how much space that you have available, right? So for my particular setup, I have two drives. I have an SSD drive, and then I have a larger drive that's 2 terabytes. Um, and so the thing is that by default, most programs are going to try and download to your C drive, or there's tons of information just stored natively on the C drive. And so you'll definitely want to make sure that you designate where you want this information to go, especially because Windows 10. I think I've got like almost 70 gigs of information just dedicated to Windows, for whatever reason. I don't understand. But so if you ever run into a problem where your scratch disk is running out of space, you either need to clean it out, or you can just designate another place. So here's how you do it. You just go down to scratch disk, select where your drive is, and then you should be golden. So copy that. And I'm going to go back down to this mantis shaded. And I'm just throwing these on here right now, and I'll organize them a little bit here in a moment. There's probably a way to automate this. All right, so we got more than enough renders to come up with something. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, just like I did with that previous thing, I'm just going to go through, do a selection, right, and use this mask I'm just going to go down the line. All right. And so now we're going to start trying to organize these a little bit. I'm going to take this depth, I'm going to throw it up at the top, and I'm just going to hide it for now. There's one more that I want to grab. Let's see, my shadows. There we go. All right. So I'm going to turn those off for now. What I want to do is I want to focus on getting the right things in the right places. So I'm going to throw my line art up there. I'm going to bring this down to there. So basically all these ones with the tone, I'm going to keep them pretty close to each other. That'll stay up close to my line art. Shut that off for now. Might not use this because the light's going in a different direction. Okay, so I'm going to focus on blending just these layers real quick. I'm just going to use a multiply. I might bounce between multiply and overlay, but I'll just control the opacity of these. Make adjustments with my brightness and contrast. Punch up that contrast a bit. You know, what we're doing today is taking renders that we've created in ZBrush and creating illustrations with them in Photoshop. Okay, so I've got that going on. I think this is a pretty good setting to have. Something that's fairly neutral. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one off, but I will use this. Let's see. Just trying to overlay. Something that it can just kind of exaggerate those highlights. Just make it pop a little bit. I'm going to go back and continue messing with this contrast. Now, obviously you'll probably want to use an adjustment layer, so that you're not doing destructive stuff right now. I don't really care. We'll use it since I'm here anyway. The thing I don't like about this is that it's working off of everything. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to start messing with these lines. It's pretty much the same thing, so I'm going to delete that one. So I'm going to throw that on as a multiply. I'm going to take these shadows and drop them down below. Multiply that as well. Drop the level down a little bit. And then I like to use this depth layer and throw it on as multiply. And it kind of helps things to stay, the depth is going to be controlled by whatever your focus settings were on your render. And inside of ZBrush, you have some control over where your camera is actually focused, just based on the render settings themselves. Okay. So from this, I'm going to take, let's see, I'm going to duplicate this this line layer. So let's see, we're going to go duplicate. And on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a filter. I'm going to throw a Gaussian blur on there. And what this is going to do, you don't want to go too crazy and make it all blown out. But it can kind of give you that rough sketchbook feel. And let's see, what else can we do? We could duplicate this one too. Throw it on as a multiply. And do the same thing with the filter. Just throw a Gaussian blur on there. Just trying to create a look like maybe kind of smudged some of the shadows in on your sketchbook. And then once this is all said and done, I'm going to get rid of these layers that we didn't use. So this one, that one, those are going bye-bye. Okay, so I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to merge them. Before I go too much further, I'm going to duplicate this and turn it off real quick. And throw it on to multiply. Throw a bit of a blur on there. out too much. I'm going to turn this one back on, and this one I'm just going to do an overlay. And so that's pretty much the long and short of it, right? And you can take this thing that you've created, and now you have something that somewhat looks like you may have drawn it in a sketchbook. You can even, if you really wanted to kind of trick it out, maybe kind of throw a vignette on there and invert it. Then let's select, modify, throw a feather on it. Pretty high, actually. Then we'll just fill that. We'll say black. You know, nothing crazy. It's maybe you want to use this, maybe you don't. I like being able to take the things that I've created and kind of display them in a bit of a different fashion. You know, it keeps me working in all these other programs, and it helps me to stay a little bit sharp whenever it comes to this stuff. Albeit I'm not a Photoshop guru, but I can take photos and mash them together and make something reasonable out of it, right? And so this could be useful. Say you get say you work on commissions for like 99 designs or something like that. You can come up with all sorts of stuff, right? And for some people, drawing in 2D is a challenge, right? There are tons of artists that I know that they will tell you right away they're not so great whenever it comes to 2D, and sometimes I am one of those, right? And that's really dependent upon the person that's doing it. Some people can think spatially while drawing in 2D, and other people it's a bit difficult for you to do that. And I happen to be one of those people from time to time. Uh, Very rarely, drawing is difficult, and very rarely can I nail down a three-quarter pose perfectly. And it comes with a lot of time, a lot of work. But I like working in 3D and bringing things down into 2D because it helps me to stay focused on the design of the character and not drawing perfect three quarters or whatever all that crap is. So I hope this has been useful. I'm gonna be cutting this short today, but this is a cool way to go, and it will be up for everybody else to view. And I'll edit it down a little bit, but just food for thought. If you're interested in doing stuff like this, go for it. If you have questions about the process or anything like that, definitely hit me up on the group or through here. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys have a great day. Happy ZBrushing.